the rise of the robots. There has actually been a whole industry of publications talking about the future of the professions, the rise of the robots, and the threat of automation to human labor. And these have not been hidden away or obscure books. Many of them have been bestsellers. In the case of this book by Richard Susskind and his son Daniel Susskind, The Future of the Professions, How Technology Will Transform the Work of Human Experts, this was a Financial Times bestseller. I have no idea how many architects were reading it, but it's been read by every other profession. And what are they saying in this book? Well, we're all familiar with these kind of images. This is a Amazon logistics plant, an Amazon distribution plant, where what is noticeable, most noticeable, is the absence of any human worker. We're also familiar with a Tesla car factory, for example, or indeed any car factory, where almost everything is being done through automation, through robots. There are no human workers to be seen here either. But the point that the Suskins make is it's not simply the blue collar workers, those working in the factories whose jobs are at threat from robots and from automation. It is also the white collar workers, the professionals, who are also at risk. And this is the comment that they make without going into any detail about what that technology might be. They don't define AI, they don't go into the whole process of different types of AI and so on, but they simply have this overview. And this is the point they make. Says Richard and Daniel Susskind, we are on the brink of a period of fundamental and irreversible change. Technology will be the main driver of this change, and in the long run, we will neither need nor want professionals to work in the way that they did in the 20th century and before. That perhaps is shocking. So why are they saying these things? The principal concept that they work with is the notion of the grand bargain. In other words, it's only a social contract that has been agreed by all parties that has assigned the role of the architect to the architect, the role of designing and constructing buildings to the architect. All that can change, especially when you come under pressure from profit. When profits trump clients, when the incentives and reward systems of professional businesses favor cash over culture, and when ethics entails minimal compliance by box ticking, then the grand bargain looks outmoded. That social contract, whereby architects are the ones who design buildings, has given way. And architects are not protected like lawyers or doctors and so on in what they do. It's already being eroded. And again, another book that came out as part of that library by Martin Ford, a winner of another Business Book of the Year award winner. Again, not exactly hidden. 2015, The Rise of the Robots, Technology, and the Threat of a Jobless Future. Those two words, a jobless future, should send shivers in anyone who is currently studying for a future in any profession. Shivers down the spine of anyone. And the way that Ford describes these things is quite straightforward. He offers a kind of a thought experiment, shall we say. And he describes how all of a sudden the Earth is invaded by a horde of extraterrestrial aliens, whose primary motivation is fulfillment from performing useful work. As he puts it, the aliens have no interest in leisure, entertainment, or general intellectual pursuits. They have no concept of a home or personal space, private property, money, or wealth. Gradually, these aliens integrate into our society and economy. They are eager to work and they demand no wages. They start off in more routine, low level jobs, but rapidly demonstrate the ability to take on more complex work. Gradually, the aliens displace human workers. Even those business owners who initially resist replacing people with aliens eventually have little choice but to make the transition once their competitors do so also. The aliens, of course, are robots. And as the story unfolds, the consequences pan out in an all too predictable fashion. As Ford puts it, unemployment begins to rise relentlessly, competition for jobs increases, the public becomes increasingly fearful about the future. A small number of people have been doing extremely well as business profitability has increased. Sales of luxury goods and services are booming. For the rest, it's a dollar store economy. As more people are employed or become fearful they will lose their jobs, frugality becomes tantamount to survival. The crucial point that Ford is making, however, is that these aliens do not buy anything. As such, there are no funds feeding into the economy. Nor indeed do these aliens need the protection of professional associations to defend their rights. So forget the AIA and the RIBA and so on. Eventually, this leads to a complete economic breakdown as people default on their mortgages, debts soar, and tax revenues collapse. Eventually, even the prosperous elite have to cut back. Even the prosperous elite have to cut back. Instead of consuming luxury goods, they start to buy gold. What Ford is pointing to then is not some nostalgic adieu to the demise of the professions, but rather a deep-rooted collapse of the economy. What is interesting is the fact that he wrote this actually well before the last election. Um, and because it takes a year and a half for a book to come out by the time you to actually write it, and then you can go through the editorial process and so on. So the book came out in 2016, well before the election of Trump. But what is interesting about some of the comments here is that he says, I find it somewhat ironic that many conservatives in the United States are adamant about securing the border against immigrants who will likely take jobs that few Americans want, while at the same time expressing little concern that the virtual border is left completely open to higher skilled workers who take the jobs that Americans definitely do not want. Sorry, that Americans definitely do want. In other words, it's not the problem, it's not the Mexicans. The problem is automation. Automation is going to take away jobs. And of course, we all know from Andrew Yang and the Yang Gang, this has become a central political issue in the States. But my point is, it was already an issue before Andrew Yang had drawn our attention to it. It's automation, not immigrants, taking jobs. In fact, Obama even mentioned this when he was president. Because of automation, because of globalization, we're going to have to re-examine the social compact the same way we did in the 19th century and then again after the Great Depression. The notion of a 40-hour work week, a minimum wage, child labor laws, etc., those will have to be updated for these new realities. But if we're smart right now, then we will build ourselves a runway to make those transitions less abrupt. Have we? In fact, COVID has shown that automation and all forms of computation, frankly, are taking over. Contactless payment, meetings on Zoom, and so on and so on and so on, have been, in a sense, shunted forward. through COVID. And likewise, the robots are taking over because robots do not get COVID. Robots are taking over during COVID-19 and there's no going back. That's the message of this article. And if you want to hear an interesting and entertaining rant on this, I would refer you to Sebastian Erasmus, who is a designer based on New York, who pulls no punches and points out that for architects that they've got to realize that they are going to lose their jobs. All they can do, in his terms, is diversify. They need to diversify and take on different tasks, as indeed those architects had recognized in that initial survey done in London by the Royal Institute of British Architects. The only way to survive is to engage in other forms of activities. Other activities for which the architects are indeed well qualified. I refer to these sometimes as other architectures. There are many areas in which architects have gone into, either from the terms of filmmakers. There are a number of filmmakers who come out of architecture. There are a number of people working 3D printing. Rem D. Koolhaas as 3D print shoes, the nephew, that is, of Rem Koolhaas. Others are working in 3D printing in other areas and so on. People working in the space industry and space architecture and so on and so on and so on. There are other areas in which we can be deployed. And let us not forget that the skills we have as architects, the skills that we're getting through education, the potential, the capacity to design, to think in 3 dimensions, and to understand material behaviors are quite unique skills that actually are quite marketable. So the message here is that architecture is dying, and it's time for architects to start thinking about diversifying in order to survive.